Hi, welcome to Dataracity's CFO Q&A. So today, this is our first Q&A for finance leaders. Today we're going to be tackling the topic on data and analytical projects. So yeah, we get a lot of questions from clients we work with around data projects, and we're going to be going through 5 of the most common questions that we get asked. So we've prepared some answers for those questions. But we're also going to have a live Q&A session, meaning you can submit any questions that you have throughout the session, and we will try and answer as many as we can. And if not, we'll answer after the session. Just feel free to go back to the comment section and see if we've answered the questions you've had. Okay, so I'm going to present the agenda really quickly. Okay, so we'll quickly start with just introductions, myself and Luke, and then we will dive into the prepared questions, the 5 prepared questions we have, and then we'll do a live Q&A where we're going to review some of the comments that you guys have put in the comment section of the live, and then we will try to answer as many as possible. So yeah, that's the agenda, and so I'll get started with my introduction. My name is Amanda. I'm a co-founder at Dataracity. I have a lot of experience in the data and analytics space. I've been working in the industry for over 15 years now, working for medium to large corporations, helping them set up their reporting, their analytics in various industries, finance industry mostly. And yeah, we also have a company called Dataracity. Luke and myself are co-founders, and we've been helping companies set up their analytics platforms. Usually the people we work with have ERP systems already set up. They have a couple of systems set up, and they want to flesh out their analytical environment. And this is what we do at Dataracity. And I'll just give Luke a few minutes to introduce himself, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I'm Luke, also co-founder Dataracity. I've had about 14 years in the industry as well. I started off in audit in the banking world, so had a very detailed look at how big environments, complex business rules, lots of data impacts things. I've seen a lot of the mistakes happen. I've had to deal with a lot of the mistakes as well, and I've learned a lot out of that. And we've come up with a way of approaching environments informed by these pitfalls we faced, and we've brought that skill set now to help other companies build out their platforms, build out their environments, and avoid those pitfalls that we typically face.
Great, thanks, Luke. Yeah, that's about right. And so we'll start off with the first question. So Luke will be answering the questions. I'll be asking them, just to keep the format really simple. So one of the first questions that we get from leaders that are responsible for making sure that their organization is using as much of their data as possible to drive decisions is they usually have put up an ERP system. They've invested a lot of money and time into getting the data into the ERP system. And the question is usually, why isn't that enough? Why isn't it enough just to have an ERP system set up? Why do we need an analytical platform to do reporting?
Yeah, it's definitely an important question that comes up. Some of these ERP platforms are pretty impressive as well. One thing you have to remember, and that we come across often, is we call these platforms brittle, in the sense that when you come in as a company, all companies are very unique. So you might buy the ERP system, but there's always an expectation customization is going to have to be put into place. So this customization could be quite extensive. It would require the vendors, developers to change the code, to add things to it. And that means that the initial analytics platform that comes with this ERP system also needs to be updated. Now, that process can become very brittle in the sense that as you need something new, a new business rule added, maybe you need to update the lookups, or maybe you need to add a new business process completely, that analytics platform also needs to be updated. Now, that usually involves the vendors, developers going back and editing, and it could take really long. So shifting or adapting to that process could cost money as well there. There, we also call that rigid in the sense that, let's say you want a new visual, you have new data, you want a new visual showing there. It takes really long to update those platforms as well. So again, the developers might have to add more visual code there. A lot of complexity gets added. The more changes, the more customization required, the more complex the environment, the more difficult it is to update analytics on that platform. So another big problem we typically face with a lot of these ERP systems, an ERP system is meant to report operational results. So let's say you have certain historical data. Most ERP platforms report their numbers with the data and the detail as at today. So getting historical numbers out of that platform has tended to be quite difficult. Maybe the ERP system doesn't keep proper history on it, so you can't really say when something changed. Maybe they don't keep snapshots, so their numbers shift even though you might have closed off your books. So a lot of the ERP systems aren't really built to answer questions, what was a historical number quite a while ago? So there again, reporting historical values is pretty difficult. And then another and the big reason ERP suffers or struggles with this is where we say, let's say you have your ERP and you added new systems, maybe logistics, maybe HR, maybe payroll. You're adding more systems to your environment. So now you ask yourself, okay, I want to report ERP numbers and my logistics, for example, together. It becomes really difficult. Like you either have to get the data out of the ERP and then have your logistics, or you upload your logistics into ERP. But then again, you're facing that problem where the developers would have to update your platform properly to make that data work. So that's where we also say it's very rigid reporting, especially when it comes to cross systems.
Yeah, it sounds like with analytics, there's more flexibility required, and with sometimes it is hard to be able to have that on an ERP system. There'll be more work, more integrations. So that makes sense. But just as a sub point, what about people that have Power BI? Isn't it possible to just pull directly from the ERP system and just start reporting directly from there? Why build a data warehouse? Why bring the data into some type of data lake or analytical platform?
Yeah, that's a very important consideration as well. So if we look at the usual process of reporting, a lot of people start with Power BI. It's really user-friendly, or any reporting tool really. It's user-friendly, it gets the job done, it gets visuals going, gets them thinking about things, which is all very nice and very important to go through. The problem though becomes, let's say you have a nice report and and it's doing some type of profit margin reporting. Now you want to add that logic to another report. You want another report showing profit against something else. You have to duplicate the logic between those reports. So what we have found, it starts as you add more Power BI, your code becomes really complex and you're maintaining many different touch points and a duplicate logic across these reports. Now imagine that one person has profit some way and some filters is driving that data, and another report has perhaps different filters that didn't realize. You're starting to see a shift in how your logic is applied across your dashboards. So that's a real risk with just Power BI off the ERP, is that logic shift and the complicated maintenance process. Another problem with Power BI is you might often find that you have to manually extract data. Like a lot of ERP systems, they might not have APIs available. They might have a complex data extraction process. They might have hidden some of the tables even. So you might have to manually extract that data, and that's a manual step that you have to remember each time. So 2 or 3 months down the line, somebody else takes over. It's not very clear where to find that data, and they extract maybe incorrect data as well. So that manual thought process around just Power BIs, that's also a risk that you have to face. So another thing is when you refresh these Power BIs, you start hitting the ERP's resources. Some very big systems, very big data. You might be running for a long time to download that data. It's hitting your ERP system. Some ERPs you pay for that extra resource, others you might see a slowdown. So a real risk is that you might have to stagger when you refresh your Power BIs. So you have that concern there as well. And also the Power BI itself, performance degrades. Like maybe it's a really complex Power Query, maybe it was unnecessarily inefficient, or it is just really big data. that Power BI might run really long. And in that sense, it might even time out. So at one point, you're going to struggle to actually get your dashboards to refresh.
Yeah, makes sense. When you looking to scale your analytical environment and build more reports, it might start, you must start hitting some issues, some resource issues, and also complexity, right? So makes sense that to consider, bringing it into a central environment. All right, so next question that we sometimes get from clients or in consults that we have is how do people know if what the setup that they have is actually holding them back? How do they know if there is something else they can do to make decisions faster with their data? What are some of the tell signs that something's not they're not getting the full potential of their data for analytics?
Yeah, this type of issue often creeps up on teams and they start realizing something's wrong when things are breaking. Now, I've faced a lot of these red flags as well in my many years in the industry. So the first telltale sign is if there's a lot of man hours required to do reporting. What I've seen often is as companies grow, often Excel is the first thing. A lot of Excel work is done, a lot of data is manually added. There are a lot of manual massaging of numbers. So what happens is as they move and the data grows, more man hours are required to do the reporting. And I've seen some serious cases where it takes a week before month end, and it's a team of 4 people sitting there and doing the work for that entire week, trying to get the numbers right. A lot of time is spent on reconciling, a lot of time is spent on cleaning. So that is a clear red flag. It takes really long to do reports. And now if you have many reports and you end up saying, well, I can only get my reports once a month or once a quarter, basically. And that's a big red flag, like something is going on there. Another problem with all of these man hours and these dashboards made by Excel is it becomes very difficult to make a change. So a big problem is that let's say you come and you say, I want new numbers. There's a new business rule we need to add. The team might tell you, well, we have to go off and we have to research how to do this. We have to make sure we understand these calculations. So it becomes a big lead time to implement this change. It might even be something small in your opinion, but it could take a while. Now that's another red flag, how long it takes to make changes to the environment. And I briefly touched on it now. When you ask the team, where's the number coming from? Does this number reconcile? Again, they have to say, okay, we'll go research for you. What is driving this number? Which source data? What business rule? Maybe there's a mapping and somebody hasn't remembered to update that mapping regularly. All of that happens in an environment where you haven't automated enough. And that's a big problem. Like if you cannot know that your numbers reconcile every time you get the report. You cannot know where it comes from. If these aspects take time to answer every month, you start distrusting your reporting, and that is a concern. So again, if there's no recon going, that's a big problem as well with the environment. So all of these things considered, if you say, well, we're bringing in a new system, and you immediately feel the team hesitating, they start worrying, they start raising how much interdependency there is, how complex things are, how many things are going to fail. That scaling mindset, if that feels difficult and big, there's probably something wrong in the environment as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. That hesitancy and not having that confidence in the results and what the business is or what the environment is already doing. So a lot of we've sat in consults where somebody really wants to automate more, and they want to make sure that the environment doesn't take too long. It doesn't take too many man hours to actually produce these reports. But with an investment like this, it is sometimes hard for them to show ROI or justify the investment and the expense to perhaps their board or the executive team. So what are some of the tips or some of the ways you think it would be easy to, or some of the ways to try and show ROI or at least show what the return might be if somebody had to invest in a project like this?
Yeah, this is a big question that often comes up as well. So in our world, we usually say, go off and analyze your environment, and you should sit with teams, you should discuss business processes, you should understand from them what data they're using, what reporting are they doing, and any gaps. And this includes how much time is spent in cleaning that data, maintaining it, how much time is spent in handing over knowledge. All that time should be captured. And ideally, what you would do is you'd capture an average hourly rate per person. And a simple multiplication of that time will show how much is costing you to do your manual reporting or to do any reporting, even if there's some automation. That cost obviously expands across the year. So if someone is spending a week every month, and then you're multiplying by 52, it can be quite big. So that's a very nice number to show. It shows how much is it costing you to do this reporting. Then something that comes out of that, let's say you automated all that time that's saved by these people, it gives them time to actually apply insights to the data. Let's say something's happening with your equipment, maybe you're spending, it's not allocated enough, or you're renting too much. These decisions, they've come back, or these insights, they realize them a while down the line because they didn't have the time to look at the data, to really understand what's wrong, to really dig in and ask the right questions. So if you save that time, now these the users have the time to actually go and fix it. So that time, that means they can more quickly adjust to changes in the business, and that also helps reduce costs and unnecessary exposure to risks as well. To that point, you can, well, when you want to highlight that to the board, maybe you've got an example of it happening previously, or maybe you can do a rough estimate. If we had this data earlier, we could have prevented this. That cost can be quantified as well. So that's a nice way to try and say, it's happened to us, this is what it cost us, and that's something as a ROI as well. Another one that you can talk about is actually maybe revenue leakage is often a thing in companies, especially when they're dealing with customer-focused selling products. There could be revenue leakage in how much time is spent on invoicing. Maybe you missed a discount period for that invoice and you didn't realize it because there wasn't the data to support it. Like if you are getting your data once a month, for instance, you don't have the time to say, okay, I'm hitting this discount deadline, let me do something about it. So there's another data point you can show where you can actually do a quick analysis and say, maybe if I had the data earlier, maybe if I had this metric, I could have made use of some discounts. I could have saved some money in some places as well. And that leads basically to the nice thing is if you are doing, let's say, ad campaigns, or you're selling, maybe you realize something is shifting in the business. And if you realize that quickly, let's say your ad campaign starts doing badly suddenly, you can react to it faster, or you can sell your product in a different way. And that basically drives profitability of the company as well. So that's improving your sales, improving your services if you get the data on time.
Yeah, it does sound like it's an effort of going and investigating and getting some of that data and running some of these cults. I've seen people that do that up front. They tend to keep the buy-in a bit longer when it comes to projects like this, and people are more excited by the potential of all these savings. All right, so let's say people have actually done some of these projects before. They've bought a BI tool, or and they've started building out reports, or they've invested in an ERP system that under-delivered a little bit, and they want to do it again, but they don't want to repeat past mistakes. What are some of the tips or some of the ways that a person can avoid some of the past implementation mistakes and have a very concrete way to start with their best foot forward, essentially?
Yeah, this very much comes down to having experienced some of it. When you think about implementing ERP system, you're basically going out into the market, you're getting a platform, and you're customizing it, and you're customizing your data to match that platform. So there's a lot of risk involved there because there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of middle ground between your data, your business processes, and the ERP. So when we look at implementing analytics platform, or we're automating your reporting, you'd basically say, well, let me first go and understand the business. This is where you sat and you knew what business reports were being used, what data points. A big part of that is really understanding what data is in the environment, what reporting is being done, and important metrics, and we call them KPIs. So if you understand that, and the business user saying, okay, we use this report, we use that report, we rely on it daily, or this number is typically wrong, we have problems with this system. These are all important lessons to be learned before you start, and it informs how you approach the project, because you have to design around it. If a system has a lot of problems on it and you brought it in, you thought this was the right system, and actually turns out nobody trusted, that was time that you could have saved not using that system or building a process to support it differently. So it's very important to understand the business first, to understand the direction that your reporting has to take first. So then you plan it out. Now you can start building the system. It's very important during the build out to build modularly, to build in such a way that things scale. And there's a lot of best practices involved, a lot of touch points you need to focus on when you build, because if you don't know, maybe you don't capture enough logs of how things are running, you don't capture how long it runs, you're not capturing various information for you, you end up with what we call a black box in the environment. Something might fail, you don't realize it, something doesn't reconcile, you don't realize it, or worst case, the system really runs very long. So that's another pitfall to avoid. You have to build it in such a way that is maintainable and scalable. And then after that as well, it's very important when you do your dashboard build out that you engage your business users frequently. So we always try and say, let me build some minimum viable product, for instance, show it to business users, get their engagement. It's very important that you understand what type of report they would prefer to see. You might think a line graph is nice, but they prefer gauge charts. It happens often. If you build a full thing and you haven't shown business users, a very big risk is that it just doesn't meet their needs. They don't use it, or you have to go back and build from scratch. So important point there is engage users quickly, get their feedback, help them feel that they're part of the process, and it helps engagement as well. It helps them be excited about the build out, and it gets that feedback going. So after that, you also need to consider governance. Who's owning the data? Who's looking at it? Security levels. It is a very big problem to have built out all these metrics, but nobody's maintaining it. Who's maintaining the quality of the data? Who's making sure these numbers are accurate? Who's ensuring the business rules applied make sense? So that's this like a QA, quality control process that needs to be put in place, formalized, and people have to be part of that. And you have to make sure, most likely, a data steward is looking at that data regularly, and you're supporting him as well, or her. So you're supporting how they see the data. You're giving them the tools they need to also make sure things are looking correct and quality is applied there.
Yeah, it sounds like it's quite the big one to make sure you have that quality control also automated, right? Because you don't want the people that own the data and the data stewardship team to spend too many hours doing manual reconciliation. It's about actually giving them the alerts to say, hey, something's gone wrong, and showing them the exceptions maybe that are showing up in the environment. I've seen that this is very important, and I think it's good for people to know that you can automate that, right? You can automate those reconciliation checks and get notifications. You don't have to be sitting and doing those reconciliations manually every month or every week. Yeah. So last question. This is it's a very practical question that we get from clients or in consults. How much would a project like this cost, and how long would it take? So from our experience, can you maybe talk through some of those points, and maybe give some people a little bit of an idea of what a typical project would cost, or how long it would take?
Certainly. So when we look at these projects and we look at the typical phases, and we're showing it here on screen, when we look at the typical phases that we follow in implementing, there's that requirements gathering phase. This is typically a lot of meetings are involved, a lot of analysis is done. You're looking at the data, you're looking at what the report on the platforms are giving you, you're looking at data quality gaps. Let's say the user provided you certain user stories, certain warnings. As a team, you would have to go and confirm that. And typically a business analyst is involved, and there's a lot of iterative approaches involved in this process. We have typically seen it take 4 to 8 weeks, and it's just because of how much interaction with the business you have. Now, this has to happen per system as well. But essentially, once you're ready, you understand these gaps, you kind of go off, and now you bring the data in. Now, this process, this is where you start building out the initial orchestration. You start building out the platform. You're adding the data, you're seeing gaps in the system, you're seeing gaps in how the system supports the data extraction process. So there's a lot of planning here, shows where it would go wrong, and a lot of fixes occurs. So yeah, we're seeing a roughly 2 to 4 month process of clearing out all the issues. Maybe the system's really complex and you didn't realize how difficult the data is in the background. So 2 to 4 months per system is pretty average on this side of things. Then the next step is, now that it's in the environment, now you can apply your processes of cleaning this data. And when we talk about cleaning here, we're talking about you're applying some business rules, you're applying some logic, manual lookups, you're applying, maybe you have to scrub out the username, or you have to hide certain data from the rest of the environment. So this process, this phase, it typically happens in parallel with the actual data model implementation. And with the data model implementation, we prefer a centralized approach, but yeah, you're putting the data into a model that's easy for a business user to understand. And this part of the process is where you're really applying, how do I create the metrics I need? How do I go about showing this data? Maybe we do a star schema, you're creating various dimensions, you're creating various ways to highlight the structure of data to the user that's easy to understand. So the two together, often as you build out a metric, realize I need to fix this, I need to scrub that out. So that's why they happen together. The actual model creation, we do typically find that within 3 months, you have a model you can use for reporting. Now, we have to consider up to this point, this happens per system. You might be building a central model, and in that sense, this has to be staggered. You can start your process and get the data in. You don't have to wait till the end of one system to bring the next, but we have found it to work a lot cleaner if you do staggered. You bring in the first system, you build out most of the functionality, then you maybe slot in the second system soon. So in that sense, these timelines per system, they kind of extend the overall project scope, project timeline as well. And that kind of, you can finish your data model implementation before you start reporting, but it's always better to get reports out quickly. So after the first model is kind of added to the after the first system's added to the model, you start building out reports. Now we prefer to address a report process as a separate thing, as a separate thought process. This is because when we found that when we do the dashboards, there's a lot of interactions with the business, as I mentioned. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of understanding. What do they want? As soon as you show them a graph, they start thinking, oh, it's better to see that this way, it's better to do this. We now understand the business rule better. That interaction is very iterative, and it tends to take longer. And it doesn't mean that the model also takes long. Once the model's done, the reports kind of just continue on their process of improvement. So we generally deal with it separate, and it takes long. A lot of iteration goes on. So this is why we're showing here a 3 to 6 month period for reports. Now, this is considering roughly 10 to 20 reports in the environment, which is pretty average. It's for a medium environment. You are spending quite a lot of time doing initial designs where you're doing UX and you look and feel, and you're kind of getting a baseline going. So quite a bit of time is spent on this phase as well. So all in all, if we then consider the big picture, considering maybe bringing in 3 or 4 systems and you're doing 10 to 20 reports, and you add up all the time, we're looking on average almost up to a year. Yeah, we got 18 months is pretty average for the system. If you think about the team involved, the number of man hours to build it out, a lot of time is spent on the reports to make sure they work. A lot of time is spent on the reconciliation process, and definitely reverse engineering system reports. We're looking at on average up to 320,000 over 18 months per build out. If you kind of compare this to what it would cost an internal team, what we found is often with internal teams, they have a lot of other things to focus on. Maybe they got meetings, currently running projects. So it takes them a bit longer to build out a platform like this from scratch. So there, of course, we're expecting a bigger cost over the long term as well. But it's still the same process for them, still the same impact. And ideally, when you think about this, a big point that we like to make is that you don't necessarily speed up the process by adding more people to the team to do this. We find smaller teams work better just because of how many things are dependent on each other, the interaction required, and the care that needs to be taken to structure it. A smaller team still gets the work done and a bit more efficiently, a bit more easier as well.
All right. Thank you, Luke, for answering all of those questions. And we've covered all 5 of our questions that we prepared for you guys today. I hope you found all of these answers useful. And please feel free to message myself and Luke if you have any additional questions about what it takes to start up a data and analytics project. This is, at Dataveracity, we do this all the time, and we would be happy to, get on a call if there's an opportunity to assist you guys. But yeah, feel free also to comment on this live as well if you have any questions that come up. But my profile and Luke's profile are attached to the session, so you guys can reach us pretty easily on LinkedIn. Yeah, for those that joined live, thank you very much for doing so. And obviously everybody who's watching the recording as well, thanks for watching to this point. All right, till next time, bye.
Bye.